Assalamu alaikum, folks. What a nightmare, what a nightmare. Let me share this and quickly get this on its way. Right, okay. Inna alhamdulillah wa kafah. والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فالسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا bienvenidos a todos Huanying Layth and Swagatam people, Swagatam. For some reason, I don't know, Facebook was playing up, so it wouldn't let me do any live, and it wouldn't let me, it was really difficult to just post. And apparently there was some nationwide outage or something, not even nationwide, amongst a few different, some parts in America and Europe, so I don't know. Anyway, but I thought I'll try it, and it worked, so I thought, what the hell, since I'm still sitting here, might as well just get this show on the road. So right now, okay, I'm just trying to get into the questions where they've been submitted, so I could just I'll delete that other post. I can see that here. I'm saying I'm not going to go live. Well, alright people, alright, so what's going on, yep. Fatima to Zahra, swagatam, aapka swagat kiya jata hai. It was down for a while, my internet, it was just ridiculous because everything else would play on here, whatever I'd check, but Facebook would just say, check your internet. So, what is going on, people? Muhammad Habib, alaykum assalam, all the way from Islamabad. Shahmir has begun straight away with the question. I think we need to jump in with the questions, folks, because we have Maj Salim, much love from King's Heath, right back at ya, man, right back at ya. Robin, como estas? Is saying she's caused controversy in my name. Yes, salam. What could that controversy possibly be? What could it be? Did I watch Sheikh Asrar's live chat last night? No, I didn't. I heard about it though from some people, and they said he didn't really address any of my issues apart from he affirmed. He said that some of these hadith, I think my understanding is he affirmed them. So he says he believes in them. Amazing. What happened to the honor of the Prophet? Honestly, what happened to the honor of the Prophet? But, right, from Canada, alright, man. And he said something about the hadith about the Prophet Moses, alayhi salam, running around naked. He said something like, well, I think this is what I was told. He justified it by trying to say, well, one, the Prophet Moses had a different sharia. And two, he said, like, he tried to say it wasn't referring to his testicles, it was referring to some kind of skin disorder. Once again, clearly doesn't understand Arabic, or he's refusing to read the commentaries. I showed you that from a dictionary. It is actually a scrotal hernia, and it'll mention that in all the commentaries as well, in Arabic as well. So, right, from Detroit, Michigan, right, we've got Ahmed, ahlan wa sahlan. Sobia Akhtar from Huddersfield, ahlan wa sahlan. You've got Shu'aib, Abdul, Abdul Subhan. Alright, Ahlan wa Sahlan. Right, so, and Nafiz. Oh, Swagatam, Swagatam, Ahlan wa Sahlan. Right, so, some questions coming straight in. Sabah Ahmed saying salam from Jamaica. Right, so, okay, if you say so. Does the soul cause consciousness? Let's get right in there, people. The tea drinker is asking for a hello. Right, hello to the tea drinker, man. I'm from India. Alright, phir bhi dil hai Hindustani. Alright, people, shukran, ahlan wa sahlan, people all from all over the world. Look at that, from Cali. We got people from Singapore. Right, absolute Afghanistan. Yes, salam. Much love, people, much love. Right, so let's get straight into some of these questions, because an hour of our time has already gone. Right, so today I thought I will check in with some of, I'll take a look at certain questions dealing with reason, the position of reason in religion. How important is reason? Right, so from Bulgaria. Now I don't know whether people are just right, so ahlan wa sahlan bikum, ahlan wa sahlan. Right, so reason, the role of reason, I'll be taking a look at that theme tonight. So any questions centered on that, feel free to fire away, folks. I wanted to say also, I mentioned last week that we had an amazing sit down with what I think is an unprecedented sit down with some representatives of the Shia community. Sayyid Reza, Sayyid Ali, a few of these people came down, had an amazing kind of sit down, amazing dialogue. And so the first part of that is out on YouTube, people, so check that out. The first part is an intro, and I'm sharing a kind of personal journey into my studies when I went off to study. What did I kind of come across, some of the issues, where did I go, what did I study. So it's almost so that's a good integral part of the interview, and that's on their channel. It's on YouTube, so you can check that out. We will be sharing it as well. So Henry, Marga, ahlan wa sahlan. Right, so I can't seem to open the rest of this question. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it. Somebody seriously sharing of the four madhabs, what drew you to the Maliki Madhab? Right, the Facebook must be playing up. I can't seem to open any of these questions that are, so it only shows me where it says see more, it doesn't open up. So, right, the Maliki Madhab is the Dawn Madhab, people. It's the Dawn Madhab. The response for that is, I didn't choose the school of Medina. The school of Medina chose me. Allah, people. That's what it is. So, no, in all essence, I do discuss that in my in that interview as well. But it is one of the most awesome outlooks and perspectives upon the Sharia. It's a school that is incredibly unique from several aspects. One, it is the city of Medina. It has the incessant practice of the people of Medina. Two, it is firmly rooted within the Sunnah, yet equally rooted in this concept of maslahah, of welfare. And that is such an important concept, especially which resonates more so today, more so than ever before in the 21st century. Seriously, this concept of maslahah, of welfare, of being able to right, people, anybody trolling, you are going to get blocked, so you've been warned. Right, so I can see somebody there saying about some Kiki challenge. Right, so right, so just to highlight that, right, so whoever's kind of posting about Kiki or whatever it is, you are about to get blocked. See, that's what you call power. Khadija saying, I am admin. Okay. Right, so discrepancies between reason and revelation. So that's what we want to focus on, this whole thing of reason. So I want to come to that. Let me just finish stating, yep, so do watch that, my interview on the Shia channel. That's, I think, incredibly important. I also feel it's a useful reminder to state once again that we need to bridge the gaps, people, between the Shia and Sunni communities. We need to really bridge that gap. That's what I feel, because I think there's too much hate out there as it is. We need a bit of love and compassion, people. Right, so that's what it is. Okay, so cool. I thought I'd mention that because I see a lot of this, you know, there's a lot of sectarian, that kind of bashing, useless bashing, really, that's just going on. And I think that things like that, there needs to be some kind of repetitive reminder. I saw today Dr. Umar al Qadari had a post where he had shared, it was a kind of clip by a Shia, presumably a scholar, who was at in the Masjid al-Nabawi, and he's giving a positive message, and he's also speaking very positively of the Khulafa, of Abu Bakr, of Umar radiallahu anhum, and the message of unity he's giving in general. And Dr. Umar al Qadri had shared that, and I wanted to share it actually, but I couldn't, it wasn't allowing me at the time. But it's a good it's a necessary message, people. Right, what are my thoughts on engineer Muhammad Ali Mirza? Right, I find him interesting. He's definitely much more critical than many of the others, although he still has a strange way of looking at things. He's definitely still, ironically, perhaps a dogmatist to many, you know, to some extent, right? So yeah, so somebody's saying about my message about the Shia thing that, look, when they stop having ill feelings. Look, what I would say is that there's a difference between what people, like, we don't know what people feel in their hearts. But what I would say is that as far as abuse is wrong. And there are many Shia who do not abuse. They do not verbally abuse companions, do not verbally do these things, and they consider, and there's many Shia scholars, many ayatollahs, many of the ulama who even deemed it haram. Ayatollah Sistani is one. There's many, and you can just Google or YouTube and you can see their interviews. And so I think there is a substantial number of people that want that positivity, they want that connection, and there's a strong number of people from the Sunni community as well that do want that kind of some just bridge of just human compassion, that's all. So yep, so Sayyid Ali there saying that, yep, I've highlighted that, that's what we were already speaking about, the interview, so people definitely do watch that. Cool, so right, let's move on, take some of these questions. Right, salam from the voice of reason. You should grow your YouTube, inshallah, people, inshallah. What are your thoughts on the recent Draw Muhammad cartoon controversy? Are Muslims always up? You know, Uthman, the question is, try to keep your questions, people, try to keep your questions quite precise and concise, because it's not allowing me to expand. So it's not allowing me to see the rest of, so I can just about see 2 lines of what you write, and the rest it's kind of summarized, and it doesn't let me open that up. Right, so thoughts on Nasr Abu Zayd. Are we speaking about the Egyptian scholar, or are we speaking about somebody else? Going a bit haywire. See more buttons acting up. Comment section going a bit haywire. We can't open the see more either. Yep, so people, keep the questions kind of like in one line if you can. Learn the art of brevity, people. That's what I'm talking about. Right. So, why do you believe Allah would not bend the laws of nature? Right. School of theology should one follow as a Sunni? Thoughts on Hassan ibn Farhan al-Maliki. Alright, so quite a few questions here, people. Apostasy in the Muwatta, yes or no? Answer is no. So, that's because you asked it so simply, so I'm giving a very simple response. Please elaborate on Jesus having a father. The world of questions have poured in, people. World of questions. Okay, let's try tackling some of these. Right, so starting off with... trying to remember them now. The laws of apostasy. Okay, so I've answered these before. That look, there is no ruling for apostasy. There is no ruling on punishing an apostate within Islam. It is a fabricated hadith, people. I'm telling you, this hadith that is being relied upon, the essence of which is in Bukhari, transmitted through Ikrama, Mawla ibn Abbas. Ikrama was from the Khawarij. He was from the extremist kind of, the Khawarij were the nutcases. They were the pioneers of ISIS today. There's no way on earth you can accept their hadith on barbarism. Okay, you have to be totally twisted to accept that. And then they're attributing it to Sayyidina Ali, and the Khawarij used to hate Sayyidina Ali, and equally as they hated Sayyidina Muawiyah. So I think in that sense, there should be alarm bells ringing all the, at every step, really. So exactly, so they were the original kind of forefathers of modern day ISIS. They were, so obviously when they're transmitting hadith about killing people, are you older than Jesus? Khadija, clear, behave yourself before you get blocked. So apostasy in the Mudawwana, yes or no? Right, so John Snow is asking a lot of these kind of questions. Let me just respond one thing at a time. So this apostasy thing I am responding to, that look, I'm not saying that scholars in the past did not speak on apostasy. They did speak on apostasy. I'm not saying scholars in the past did not pass the ruling to say, should we execute apostates? They did. They did say that. So I'm not trying to say that nobody in Islam said things like that. They did, but listen to the distinction. The Quran did not say that, and the Sunnah did not say that. Yes, men did come up with these rulings, and I can see why they would do it, because to them it's just a position of power, and it's a position, you see, as religion begins to get institutionalized, it's very... we can all understand why people would do things like that. They would do it as maybe as a threat, maybe as a deterrent, maybe as exercising power, maybe as a tool to punish groups they disagreed with. Because if you can establish the ruling of apostasy now, because if you think about it, look, listen, throughout most Islamic history, apostasy is a very rare phenomenon. It's a very rare phenomenon. Like, it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. But it's very rare. Like, you're not going to... Those people who probably apostated, probably, most likely, if you were a person... let's say, even today, if you're a person living in, let's say, Pakistan or Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, and you apostated, most likely, like, as in you no longer believed in Islam, you would just go with the flow. But in your heart and mind, you just would not believe in Islam. So that's how most people would do it, because if you're going to think about it, most people do not actually pray. Most people do not actually do anything ostensibly Islamic. The ostensible Islamic practices are simply cultural. So wearing a shalwar kameez or a thobe wearing a shalwar kameez in Pakistan does not make you Muslim. So the Sikhs in Pakistan or the Hindus would equally wear shalwar kameez because it's the national dress. So wearing a thobe in Saudi Arabia does not make you Muslim, because anybody living in Saudi Arabia would wear a thobe. So these people would just go with the flow. Like, why would you want to be executed? Why would you rise up in Pakistan and say, hey, I'm an apostate, I'm an apostate? So in the past, it would have been no different. So the question is, why were the people stressing on apostasy laws, since apostasy was such a rare and acute phenomenon? And the one possible answer to that is this was really a tool to be used against Muslims, not against non-Muslims, because non-Muslims didn't live in Muslim lands. So the question was, who were Muslims really using this against? Since the true apostate would be a rare and odd phenomenon, they would use this again. An apostate is somebody who abandons the faith. Now, they would use this against who they would deem to have become an apostate. I.e., so let's say the Khawarij would call the entire Muslims apostates. Sunnis may call the Shia apostates, or Shia may call Sunnis apostates, or Sunnis may call the Mu'tazila or the Jabariya or the different sects that they emerged, or individual people that they disagreed with. So today, for example, when I teach things, people are calling me an apostate. Now, there's no doubt that if I lived 1,000 years ago, in those territories, the way the Molvis and the Mullahs had their political sway, that people would have definitely, by pushing the law, by saying he's an apostate, they would have then said that the follow-on would be that he deserves to be executed. Do you understand? So now, this is where these people would have been instrumentalizing these laws. So really, in all essence, the apostasy laws were not really to do with true apostasy, as in ex-Muslims today, the way you have ex-Muslims or you have atheists today. In my understanding, apostasy laws were really about controlling who Muslims felt were heretics or deviants or other sectarian groups. That's what it was about, in my understanding. I could be wrong, but that's what because to go to such lengths to speak about apostasy when it's such an acute and rare phenomenon. Does the criminal view act render one's credibility and knowledge useless? The Khawarij. So somebody's asking, because the Khawarij, does that mean whatever they were reporting is useless? No, but it makes it suspect. It makes it... Sure, I mean, if the Khawarij transmit a hadith saying it's sunnah to smile, there's no problem with that hadith because it fits in with the general Islamic understanding. But if they transmit a hadith that you should butcher somebody, and by the way, the hadith they transmit is that Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anh burned somebody to death, even though it's haram to burn people to death. So not only is that an affront and an attack on Sayyidina Ali, it's also an attack that not only did he burn them to death, he said the Prophet said execute them. And they are a group that were, that's what they would do. They would butcher people for being apostates. Because according to them, all Muslims who committed a sin were apostates. So now somebody's asking, why did Bukhari accept Ikrama? Bukhari did. You see, we're not here to question. It doesn't, you see, it's interesting that Imam Bukhari is obviously a great person in hadith, but he's not a god. Okay. For him to do something, fine. Some reasoning that people said is they may have had a very naive understanding in thinking, some muhaddithin thought that, because the Khawarij considered you a kafir if you committed a sin, therefore surely the Khawarij wouldn't commit sins. They wouldn't lie because lying is a sin, because they would then become kafir by their own theology. Therefore we should accept every hadith that they say. Abu Yahya, is this Abu admin? Can you see to the? Are you for real? What is Ikrama? What is this just trolling or or right? Just if you don't understand some of these things, please try to gather from the whole discourse. Okay. So exactly. So now Imam Bukhari apparently is one of those people, they say, that thought very piously towards the Khawarij when it came to them committing sins. But the truth is far from that. The truth is that the Khawarij did used to commit sins, and of course they would lie, because they would murder people. If you can justify murder, lying is a joke. Okay, so Ikrama was definitely a Khawarij, from amongst the Khawarij. There's a difference what type of Khawarij he was from. Okay, because the Khawarij have several groups amongst them. Okay, so there is no debate about, and Ibn Umar radiallahu an was really harsh towards Ikrama as well. Okay, so right now, okay, let's move on to the next question. Mufti, I totally follow your Bukhari gate approach, but isn't your onslaught of Farabri? I can't read the rest of the question. Right, so isn't my onslaught of Farabri... this Farabri thing I want to highlight. People today... Look, I want to highlight something. Most people hadn't even heard of Farabri before this highlighting this Bukhari gate thing that I did. Okay. Now, so let me just get that clear. Now there seems to be this view that Farabri was the greatest scholar of Islam. I don't even know whether Farabri was a scholar within Islam. I genuinely do not know. How do we know he was a scholar in Islam? I'd like to ask that. What, because he wrote down Bukhari? So it makes him a scholar of Islam? His own student, one of the key transmitters of Sahih Bukhari, is Al-Kushmayhani, Abu al-Haytham al-Kushmayhani. Everybody agrees Abu al-Haytham al-Kushmayhani was not a scholar. In fact, he was jahil bil hadith. They say he was somebody was not a scholar at all by any standard. And yet he is one of the major transmitters of Sahih Bukhari. He is one of the three that Abu Dhar al-Harwi relies upon. Although Abu Dhar al-Harwi himself says, I revisited my work and deleted and removed a lot of Kushmayhani stuff because he's not a scholar of hadith. Now, however, other people, the Karima manuscript is based on who? Karima is taking directly from Kushmayhani. So, what I'm trying to say is, what makes Farabri a great scholar of Islam? What are his works? What has he done? Like, tell me his rulings of Islam. Where did he speak about Islam? Like, all of a sudden, he's become the Allam. You see, these are what I call coincidences of convenience. Like, all of a sudden, so for example, Sunni scholars, like Muslim scholars, we get stuck with something, or Muslims, we get stuck with something that happens to be the most awesome thing all of a sudden. So the only person we have transmitting Bukhari is Farabri. You know what? Farabri is the most amazing scholar, mashallah. Oh, that simply doesn't make it so. Where do you even get that from? Like, I think we need to be more honest and open and transparent about what's going on. Farabri, I'm not saying Farabri was jahil, but what I'm saying is we have no evidence that Farabri was a learned scholar of Islam. Now, by default, I can't, how can we, now you're going to say, well, people who came hundreds of years after him described him as a very learned scholar. They did, because they were heavily invested in this enterprise of Sahih Bukhari, and Sahih Bukhari only came through him. So to big him up was necessary to support the enterprise. Now, people like Al-Hafidh al-Dhahabi, people like Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, these people are heavily invested in Sahih Bukhari. Now, I don't hate Farabri. My own chain to Sahih Bukhari, like everybody else's, goes through Farabri, because it has to go through. Sahih Bukhari doesn't exist without him. So, you know what though, in all honesty, Imam Bukhari must be turning in his grave. He must be thinking, for God's sake, I did all this. I had so, like my reputation went worldwide. I was a legend in hadith. And the only person who took me forward was this one unknown geezer. This guy who nobody has really heard of. He's my only savior. So, I mean, I don't hate Farabri, although I would view Farabri just, I feel that, look, the way we Muslims, when we're looking at other religions, we become very critical. Okay. We become all of a sudden very super, try to be objective. Oh, but the Gospel of Mark was written 70 years after, 70 CE. Oh, but these decades. Oh, but the Gospel of Matthew and Luke seem to be really based on the Gospel of Mark, and they seem to be documented anything between 80 to 120 CE, and we don't really know who is really Matthew here. Is this what is going? You see, we become really critical, and I'm intrigued that why we have double standards. You see, when it's our sources, we angel wash them. We turn everybody into angels. Like, Farabri becomes Imam Farabri. He becomes an Imam. We don't know anything about this person, apart from the fact, the very basic rudimentary facts, like he was from a particular region, and he documented Sahih al-Bukhari, which he had an incomplete version, and some people took it from him. But he became the only person from whom Bukhari is transmitted to the world. We also know by his own admission that you see now, what's interesting is he makes such grandiose claims. Like Farabri makes a claim that 90,000 people took Sahih al-Bukhari from Imam Bukhari, and in Farabri's lifetime, none of them remained to transmit it except him. Now look at that claim. That is incredibly egoistic, and it's also very suspect. Like, it makes you think, well, if we found a claim like that to do with the Gospels, we would be levitating. Now, when we find it to do with Sahih Bukhari, we become like, well, this is, I heard, like, in fact, this is something I heard Sheikh Asrar said is valid. Fine. I actually do believe that Farabri would have said something like that. Khatib al-Baghdadi transmits it. Dhahabi tries to dismiss it, but does so, I feel, disingenuously, because he tries to say the chain from Farabri to him isn't authentic, but he knows all too well that all chains from that era onward cannot be verified. That no chain after a certain era was ever verifiable. So it's only to a certain era. Now what is interesting is Farabri does make that era, but people after him, none of these chains are verifiable. So, yeah, so I mean, so some people saying that Farabri lived over 100 years. He didn't live over 100 years. Although he did live a very long life, like people say he lived 90 years or whatever. But there were people who outlived him, like Bazdawi, for example, is the last person to transmit Sahih Bukhari. And he is problematized by scholars of hadith. So they actually speak about him, whereas they completely ignore Farabri. And he outlives Farabri, by the way. So this isn't true that Farabri was... Once again, you see, we've re-engineered a story. And fine, you know, if people want to believe that, they can, you know. But it is just that, in essence. It's a story which we've kind of recreated. And people are just upset that why have I kind of exposed this story? Well, look, we owe it to the Prophet. We owe it to the prophets to not allow them to be disrespected in this way. And the way that these people, disrespect, the way many Muslims today allow us to disrespect the prophets based on hadith just because they are in guys, anybody having just nonsensical conversations on here, admin, if you can kindly block these people, please. So, right, so now just to clarify, so to move forward from there, what were some of the other questions, because there were so many questions being thrown. Will you have a talk with YASIR Qadhi? I will happily have a talk with YASIR Qadhi. YASIR Qadhi is not prepared to discuss this with me, and I can understand why. You know, on this note, I want to highlight something. You see, I want to highlight something, and that is that, look, you know, there's a reason. I want to highlight the difference between me and many of my, opposing kind of opponents, if you like, academic opponents on this issue. I say academic with, really many of them are not being academic, but still, many of my opponents in general. There is a big difference in our approach. And you can mark my words about this. And this is one of the reasons why, you know, bifadlillah, at this rate, at the way it's going, my arguments will always supersede their arguments. And I'll tell you why. Because, I mean, let alone the fact that they're based on reason, and as long as things are based on reason, you will almost always prevail, but put that aside. But because when I refute people's arguments, yes, I may have a joke and a laugh, and I may kind of crack jokes, as I often do, and I see nothing wrong in that. That's my personality, that's my way of doing things. However, when it comes to their arguments, I will steel man their arguments. Okay, I will try to get the arguments to be in the most strongest form that they can be, and then I will tear them apart. I will take them to pieces, but in the strongest possible form that I can understand them to be. Whereas what they do with me is simply straw man my arguments. So they will never take my actual arguments and try to take them apart. What they will do is cut, paste, manipulate, and simply strawman my arguments. Now, that is why their whole enterprise cannot succeed, because all it takes is for somebody to just see what's being said. You see, so that's so now whenever, look, like this discussion, you can take any of my discussions on, for example, Bukhari Gate. I have taken the best possible arguments they have brought. The fact that Dhahabi declared him Farabri's issue, the fact that these are simply chapter headings that have been moved back and forth, and I have demonstrated through evidence that these things don't stand. You see, but when it comes to me, all they will do is simply say things like, ha 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 ha, like they'll take a simple thing like which, so for example, I don't know, oh, he's trying to use this chapter headings argument. Look, it's only a chapter heading. There's no different. Oh, he's trying to say nobody declared Farabri a thiqa. Look, and then they'll just kind of manipulate. Ibn Adi said, he's my teacher, therefore he must be reliable. Ha 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 ha. We've answered this question. You see, but then you're not being true to yourself. Because if you problematized Islam to me, or an aspect of Islam, I would actually try to take the best of your argument and then take that to pieces. You know, they'll just do like silly things, like even Jonathan Brown, like just, oh, it's not Banani's Bunani, ha 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 ha, like I'll pick up on, like, first of all, and it was Bunani, but my point is, by trying to just pick on, so recently I saw a clip by, somebody sent me a clip by Sunni Defense saying, oh look, this is a rebuttal, so I'm reading, so basically they watch hundreds of hours of my viewing of my actual videos, and they'll find like a slip of the tongue, they'll find like, let's say, so for example, I'm reading something, and as a slip of the tongue, like as an English equivalent, like to give you an English equivalent, let's say instead of people, I'm talking somewhere and I said sheeple. Now they will say, like in the flow of the conversation, so they will take that clip out and they'll say, ha ha, see, this is his argument. Sheeple, ha, doesn't mean anything. Like, that is so stupid. But you can do that. So I saw this clip that they said, oh, look, he's reading. So I'm reading from a tafsir, and I think I'm speaking about the splitting of the moon, and I'm quoting Ibn Ashur, and it says, Kurat al-Qamar. And obviously, as I'm reading, in the flow of things, I've just said, instead of Kurat al-Qamar, I've said Kurat al-Qadam. Now, that's a slip of the tongue. Fair enough, it's funny. In the flow of the moment, I didn't really realize that I've obviously... So this is their refutation. Oh, you know, and Kurat al-Qamar is, it means the sphere of the moon. Now, Kurat al-Qadam means football. Now, obviously, because football is such a common word, so as reading, whilst I'm talking and I'm saying, well, Kurat al-Qamar, I've said Kurat al-Qadam. Now, this was their entire refutation. So they've made a whole video to say, well, here we've refuted him. Kurat al-Qadam, football, ha 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 ha. This doesn't... See, now that just shows, why don't you actually steel man my arguments as opposed to straw manning them? Like, take my actual argument. So one of them, so in their previous video, this is a fine example. In their previous video, I showed that these people are trying to justify marital rape. They're trying to say that the Prophet condoned to rape your wife using religious blackmail. And I said that's haram and the hadith is false. And I showed that, look, this riwayah comes through Al-A'mash and he is a mudallis. It comes through Qatada. These are unreliable sources. I mentioned that. So what they do is they will say, and I'm going through all the chains and demonstrating that this is impermissible, it is haram. So they try to refute me by saying, oh, because he has Western standards in trying to say, you know, you can't rape your wife through emotional blackmail, that, oh, therefore, you know, this is just British Western way of looking at things. and will refute him. And what they'll do as a refutation is like this. They'll just say, oh, let's watch through his whole thing, find a slip of the tongue. So in that particular video, I actually speak about Sulaiman al-A'mash. I actually mention his name on several occasions as Sulaiman al-A'mash. Now, at a certain point, when you're talking hours on end, and usually my videos last for about 2 hours, and you're talking non-stop about an argument. So there's one chain where I'm saying, well, somebody might object. And I mean to say, because I actually highlight that, look, A'mash is a mudallis, he's somebody who blags in the chain and uses an. But Shu'bah is somebody who considers tadlis haram. And Shu'bah is transmitting that chain. So, what about this chain? So that's what the argument I'm trying to bring, and I actually highlight Shu'bah, and I say, look, Shu'bah is somebody who said tadlis is haram. And in that chain, I said, oh, as a slip of the tongue, I said, oh, look, and Sulaiman, who's in this chain, so you might say, well, what about this? So the answer is this. Now, so they make a whole video to say, well, oh, you don't know who A'mash is because Sulaiman is his name. But that, you see, so once again, straw manning my argument. That, well, that's fine, but that just goes to show you have a very weak defense. Because if that's, whereas I take the best of what you've got and destroy that. So there's a big difference here. Right, so, right, does anybody agree with you on Sahih Bukhari? Right, so I just wanted to highlight this, okay. Right, let's move on to some of these questions. Because I see this a lot, and it's quite, I mean, it's, you know, it may be on some level amusing, and on other levels it just belittles Muslim cognitive, like kind of the level that we're operating at. Like it just shows how dumb and stupid we are as a community. That this is is this all you repeatedly do? Why not take the best of my arguments and destroy them? Surely you would have a much more compelling voice if you did that. Why not say, look, Mufti is saying that this Farabri issue, the editing of the book issue, the manuscript discrepancy issue, the Uninis fixing the grammatical issue, or on any other topic, just take the best of what I'm saying and destroy it. By all means, destroy it. But, yeah, so... And the answer is because they know they can't. So that was my point with Sunni defense. When I said, look, you guys are arguing to justify marital rape. You are trying to say that the Prophet allowed men to rape their wives. Now, I said that is unacceptable. It is haram and the hadith are false. Bring me one hadith that I cannot critique based on the chains. They didn't bring one, but they made like 5 videos just trying to say... Oh, one video was just saying how deluded I am because I've got like a Western way of thinking and therefore I'm wrong. Another one just saying, oh, look at him, he quoted on this thing and that quote is inaccurate. Another one just saying, oh, look, there was a slip of a tongue. Ha 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 ha. He had a slip of a tongue. Ha ha. And I said, look, okay, put all the nonsense aside, just bring me a single hadith. And you can't do it. So if you're gonna take me on, take me on. Like, don't be, you know, like, I'm not making a claim that I will never make a slip of the tongue or never make a spelling mistake or never make a, you know, and then, oh, he doesn't know Arabic. My Arabic is perfectly fine. It is very good. So, I mean, you know, and trying to say, oh, he doesn't know Arabic because he had a slip of the tongue and said the word, he said a different, Kurat al-Qamar, Kurat al-Qadam instead of Kurat al-Qamar. Oh, what, and you've never said something in English or in another language? I remember we were in Damascus, somebody who was a legend, used to teach Arabic, one of the key scholars known throughout Ma'had al-Amaniya, during our stay there. I remember one of the initial introductory kind of lessons, and he was speaking about an outing, and one of the things, and this happens so much in Arabic, and his thing was that didn't we go to, and he made this thing about alam nasbah ila al madhab, and what he was trying to say is, didn't we go to the swimming pool? But to completely switch it around in Arabic. And these things are simple. My point is, take on my actual points, answer them. I am waiting. I want to hear answers. So if you can't bring them, then just step aside. Because unlike you, I will pick the best of what you've got and destroy that. So I'm telling you, if you want to take on my challenges, take the best of what I've got and destroy it. Right now, do I believe in Gog and Magog? It's not about Gog and Magog, Yajooj and Majooj in the Quran. The question is, what are these things? What do they mean? A lot of things are mentioned, not a lot, but certain things are mentioned in the Quran that people are not too sure what it means. Like it's subject to a certain amount of interpretation. So Yajooj has this understanding of something flaring up, something being quite agitated. Now, in Yajooj and Majooj, Allah speaks on the tongue of certain people, describing certain groups. What was Yajooj and Majooj? Were these a specific people? So for example, an ethnicity. Were they a race? Were they, I don't know, a tribe? Were these terms that were being used? So for example, if I was to say the colonialists, now that's a term. It doesn't refer to a particular ethnicity. It doesn't refer to a particular race or tribe. But it refers to people who we understand, although they were diverse. Now many ulama do feel that Yajooj and Majooj was colonialism. Amongst them is Sheikh Abdul Rahman al-Sa'di, and he has a very famous risala, a very compelling risala. If you very compelling risala on this Yajooj and Majooj, and I'd advise people to read it. And he actually says that, look, after the disaster that the world have seen for centuries, Muslims are still shockingly and surprisingly awaiting Yajooj and Majooj. I'm not compelled. I am actually I do find myself in line with that it was referring to colonialism. I don't find myself believing or impressed by the interpretation of it being the Mongols. Why so? Because the colonialists changed everything. You see, everything changed with the colonial powers. Unlike the Mongols came, they did, they wreaked havoc. They kind of came, there was disaster, tragedy, genocide, stuff like this. It was swiftly over. It was something that came and went, like shockingly, people didn't expect them to die out the way they did, but they did. Beyond being an empire, the kind of Khanate empire that it was, it didn't really change much on a global scale of things, on a grand scheme of things. It didn't really change much. The imperialists or the colonialists, however, changed everything. Because with them, they brought an industrial revolution. They brought a different way of looking at life through modernity. They brought one could argue, a new set of ethics. They brought a new understanding of economy. The economy changed, money changed, everything changed in the world. It wasn't just brutality. Brutality occurred too, but everything changed. The world was never the same again. And Muslims underwent immense depression. Centuries of almost depression. That was unprecedented. So to me, that seems to fit the bill. So that's what I'm more inclined towards. Right, so what's the message that Allah gives us naming things without clarifying it in the Quran? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. A new world order. Ash'ar very well said. Thank you. They brought with them an entirely new structure and a new world order. Who was Dhul-Qarnayn? I don't really know who Dhul-Qarnayn was. He's mentioned in the Quran, but that doesn't appear to be a name. The term Dhul-Qarnayn seems to be more a title as opposed to a name. It's not really a name in Arabic. It's like saying the one of two horns. Now that's not a name. So what was this referring to? Who was the person? Some people try to say it was Alexander the Great. I don't really know if it was Alexander the Great. I don't think it was. I'm not inclined to that. Okay. Somebody's asking me about haircut and if you can have different hair lengths. Come on, grow up, people. If in 2018 you're still asking me, can we have hair of different length, and read an article that is going to argue for that, are you for real? This is why Muslims are in the state we're in. We've got like a Neanderthal mindset. It's like the cognitive revolution is completely... Honestly, if it wasn't for other human beings, we'd be extinct. Right, let's take on some of these other questions. Horns mean era. That's an interesting interpretation. Did Jesus have a father? Right, that's an interesting question. Let's deal with that. This is going to bring me on to reason. Okay, I want to first of all say something about reason. Right. People, faith must be built on reason, in my understanding. We are in unprecedented times, people. We are in the age of reason. Right now, religion is being ripped to shreds. Mark my words, people. What I am saying today about the age of reason, in decades to come, all Muslims, major Muslims, especially within the West, will sway in this direction. And the difference is, for them, I'm just ahead of my time. But the truth, this is the truth, what I'm telling you, because religion will not survive in this way. It can survive as a mythology. So you can believe in a mythology, like the Vikings believed in mythologies, the Greeks believed in mythologies, the Romans, they had many gods and many mythologies, and Hinduism to some extent is like a mythology. Now you can believe in that because they don't base it on reason. It's not meant to make sense. But Islam prides itself on reason. You can have faith without reason. I'm not saying you can't. Like, people can just believe. They can say, look, I believe. Why do you believe? Because I just do. Fine. Many Muslims in the world are like that. The challenge is here in the West. Because in the West, we have a culture of reason. So religion is under attack. So people will question your religion. They will ask you, really, so you believe, so let me get this right. So you believe in like a flying horse, and you believe in and people will question you. Now your response to that is just two things. One, you can just block the voices, I will not listen, and resort to a dogmatic wall of defense. I have my dogma, I have my dogma. Fine. It may work. For many people, it's too late. The seeds of doubt have been planted. But it may work. Like, they will just block out all critical voices and just say, I believe in extraordinary, like I believe in things that don't otherwise make sense. Fine, they can do that. But this religion, in that way, will not survive generations. It may survive with you, but as you die, that will pretty much die as well. The fact that you think your children will grow up believing in things like flying horses, you're having a laugh. They will not believe in... I mean, some of them may, I'm not saying... But not anybody who actually contemplates religion or contemplates with a mind of reason, they will not believe in these things. Right? So, this is why it's incredibly important to base things on reason, the voice of reason. Ayyub al-Maliki is asking, once again, I can't read his full question. Precision, people, concise and precise is the key word. Right, so atheist scientists are saying religion won't play a role in the future. I think it will. Religion, I think, is here to stay. But the question is Islam. We're speaking about Islam specifically. I feel Islam is here to stay as well, unquestionably. However, will Islam simply resort to becoming a mythology? Because we're at that kind of crossroad now, especially in the West. Does this just become a religion like the Vikings had religions of mystical creatures and things like that? Will it become that, or will it stand the test of reason? And actually a religion that makes sense. It's not about, doesn't have to make sense. I believe Islam can stand the test of reason. I believe that every single thing is built upon reason within Islam. Now, here, it's important to understand something. Some people will say, but does that mean we've understood everything? We haven't. And that's not what reason means. Reason does not mean must you have understood everything. It means that things are not counter reason, or if they appear so, there must be an explanation for them. So let me give you a perfect example. The Quran will mention stories. Right, so the Quran will mention stories. Now these narratives have a reason for them. And here, people, please differentiate between reason here means a kind of moral to them. And then when I'm using reason with a capital R, is to do with the ability to think in a healthy manner. Okay. Now, so these stories in the Quran have a moral to them. They have a purpose. And the purpose is to extract some kind of meaning and to be able to relate to that meaning in your life and to move forward, to be able to convey stories to your children, because people, human beings, we communicate in stories. So the story of Moses alayhi salam, the story of Jesus, the story of Noah alayhi salam, these are stories. What Allah was not trying to do is teach us science. Allah was not saying, all right people, right, listen up, today this is a lesson on geometry, or this is a lesson on physics, or this is a lesson on chemistry. That's not what Allah was doing. Yes, certain things in the Quran, we, through our discovery, may realize, wow, that actually correlates very well. That correlates. So people may say, wow, there's interesting parallels of embryology in the Quran. Wow. But I don't like this approach of trying to say Allah was trying to teach embryology 1,000 years before you people discovered embryology. That's a wrong approach, because Allah was not trying to do that. Allah was not trying to teach embryology. He was not trying to teach geology or these things in the Quran. So it's important that we get ourselves in order. Okay. So, yeah. So now, about these miracles. So if we come across something that we don't understand, there's two ways of looking at this. One is to say, so for example, imagine you read in the Quran that Moses points his staff to the sea, or he kind of hits it, and then you see that the sea is parting. Now, one way to understand this is, well, wow, how did that happen? Were there other means involved? So, for example, was there strong winds that came and pushed back the sea? Is that how it happened? Or was it just an absolute miracle? So, one way to look at this is, no, this was just an absolute miracle. Like, as in, God didn't need to use, like, God has laws in nature, but he doesn't need to, he breaks his own laws of nature. The problem with this is, why use these laws then? Why didn't God just pick up the people of Israel and just fly them through the air and just land them? I mean, why? Since you're going to break the laws of nature anyway, what is the purpose of making them take normal means? Like, what is the purpose of saying, people, right, Israelites, we're going to take you to the Holy Land, right, but you're going to have to struggle for so much, but then in the end, we're just going to bend the rules anyway. So why not just pick them up? And, you know, it's a bit like the story you have in the Ramayana about Ram, when he's trying to rescue Sita from Ravan, the 10-headed kind of demon. Now, and he takes the help of Hanuman, who builds a bridge to go over to Sri Lanka to rescue them, but then on the way back just flies back. So you think, well, you know, why not just fly there in the first place? So this thing in saying, look, God breaks his laws of nature. Allah himself says in the Quran, وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. You will never find his sunan, the way he has set things, to ever vary like that. He will never break them. That is a verse of the Quran. So what is the purpose? So one way is we just take dogma. The other way is to say, well, maybe there's a means here, there's a medium, but either we understand it, we can explore, or we don't understand it. It's okay sometimes not to understand something. Maybe other people that will come will understand it better. But the purpose of the story was not that anyway. The purpose of Moses' story was not about the Red Sea. It was not how does the sea work, or, you know, the Gulf of Aqaba. It was not about that. It was about the Israelites going to the Holy Land, to the Holy Land, which is today Israel and Palestine. This was the Holy Land that God had promised the Israelites. So this is what I'm saying, that today people have become so fixated. And the other question is, look, when I ask you, how do you know the Quran to be the true word of God? Like, how do you know the Quran? Let's simplify it. How do you know the Quran to be true? What makes it, if I put, let's say this, it isn't, but let's say this was a Hindu book, the Vedas or the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, or is one of, and you put a Mus'haf, a Quran on one side, and somebody isn't a Muslim, so they ask you, well, look, I want to convert to a religion, I want to understand something, which one should I follow and why? What would you say? Why do you believe Hinduism to be wrong? It's a good question. Why do you believe? Do you just believe Hinduism to be wrong because you're not born a Hindu? Do you believe Hinduism to be wrong because it's plausible, but I just don't incline that way? Or is it because it's irrational and it makes no sense? Is it because you think, well, let me get this right. How can there be a man with an elephant's head? How can monkeys fly? These things don't happen like that. Not across islands anyway. I mean, I'm not talking about just leaping between trees. Like, these things don't happen. So you would say, well, fine, you know, this doesn't make any sense. But then you must have that same consistency when looking at Islam. You can't say, well, you know, for them, a man, Shiva, cutting off his son's head, Ganesh cutting his head off, and then replacing it with an elephant's head, that's absolutely absurd. Why? Because men don't walk around with elephants' heads. But here, there's a tree walking around and talking. There's a wolf that speaks Arabic. There's a, you can't have that. That's absurd. Like, if you're going to accept absurdity, then you have to accept it there as well. You can't say, well, then all you can say is, okay, I don't believe in Hinduism, but it's plausible. It's maybe right. I don't know. You have to then make that argument. That argument follows by necessity. That you have to say, well, if God could twist the laws here, he could twist the laws there. How do you know God didn't bend the laws for Shiva to give his son an elephant's head? How do you know? And to say, well, the Quran didn't mention it. Quran didn't mention many things. Quran says that there's many stories we did not tell you. How do you know one of those stories wasn't this? So you don't know. So the truth is, you must always base things on reason. Because, yes, reason is not complete. I accept that. But it is the only thing that we as human beings have. And Hinduism is essentially monotheistic as well. It is, of course it is. Hinduism also believes in the kind of the ultimate Atma, the ultimate Atma. It believes in Brahma, the ultimate kind of permeating throughout existence. So they do believe in, and these are kind of like delegate gods, if you like, beginning with the Trinity and then other delegate gods as well. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of gods throughout the Hindu history. But my point being this, that if not reason, then what? Then nothing makes sense, in essence. Then anything can ultimately be true. Then I could say, look, why is the Trinity absurd? Why is the Trinity absurd? 3 equals 1, but yeah, I know that sounds dumb to you now, but maybe God made an exception. Maybe made an exception. So, as a one-off, 3 was 1. That's just a one-off. It's just a miracle that 3 were 1. You see, so it becomes absurd. So you start... So, people could say that, look, yes, reason doesn't have all the answers, but we're working towards the answers. But it's the only thing you have. You have nothing else. Faith can only be determined through reason. To say, well, no, I'm going to determine it through experience, through intuition, through well then, every other religion does exactly the same thing. Hindus would say, well, I believe Hinduism to be true through experience, through intuition. So the only faculty you have is reason. It is the only common denominator that human beings have to measure up each other's arguments. Now, if you don't abide by reason, then everything collapses. Now, then the question comes, how do we answer these miracles? We don't need to answer them. All of them would have had some explanation. Some of them you know, some of them you don't know. Okay. Now, somebody's asking, is the Trinity shirk? Well, of course, from an Islamic perspective, it is shirk. But I'm not talking about that point, because that's got nothing to do with a miracle. We're talking about miracles. Because if people are going to say, you see, Muslims will often mock the Christian thing of saying, well, ha ha ha, how can 3 equal 1? Ha 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 ha. That's basic mathematics. And I agree. It is basic mathematics built on reason. You see? Now, if you're going to say, well, no, mathematics always 3 must always add up to 3 and it can't add up to 1. Well, somebody could argue, well, maybe God made an exception. He made an exception as a one-off. Is God incapable of making an exception to the laws of mathematics? So, exactly, so it starts to become stupid. So we must always hold our bearings, the center must always hold, and we must be consistent. So I hope that helps. Somebody has asked a question here about Jesus having a father. You see, the question is not... The Quran, right, now, I'm only going by what is in the Quran. What we do is we put all the verses of the Quran in front of us about Jesus, his birth, Nowhere in the Quran, first of all, does it mention that Mary was a virgin. Nowhere. In fact, this is not even an Islamic concept to refer to Mary as the Virgin Mary. This is pure Catholic, that's all. So we do not refer to Maryam. I know in Hebrew the term for virgin was Batul, which in Arabic is used as well. So they say Maryam al-Batul. We do not say Maryam al-Batul. The Prophet never said Maryam al-Batul. The Quran never said Maryam al-Batul. Right now, and by the way, the term used in the Bible referring to Mary, because what they're trying to say is that this was, in the Old Testament, this was a kind of a prediction, a prophecy, okay, about, this was a prophecy that there will be when the young girl will give birth. Now the term they used in Hebrew was Alma. It was not Batul. And yes, Alma was used for a young lady who often coincided with being a virgin. So that coincided. That's in the Bible anyway. In the Quran, nowhere does it mention that Mary was a virgin. We don't say that, and we don't generally refer to Mary as the Virgin Mary in Islam. We don't necessarily believe that. Now, the general records show that Mary was married. However, the Quran mentions certain things. The Quran mentions that she is given glad tidings that she will have a child. And she says that, how can I have a child when I've not yet been touched? Now, the angel says, well, such is the decree of God, that when he decides something, it is. Now, the question here is, did that mean that she miraculously conceived? Now, Allah doesn't actually say that in the Quran, just to say, he doesn't say that. Many Muslims do believe it because it was the dominant narrative that Christians had as well. So I'm not saying that that's necessarily a wrong, but this is, I'm putting in front of us the Islamic narratives that are available, the spectrum. So many Muslims do believe that this is part of the Islamic understanding that, oh, she was a virgin and miraculously conceived. However, this same thing is mentioned to other women in the Quran. So the wife of Abraham, who's at an old age, and the angel gives her glad tidings, and she says, well, how can I conceive? And she's told, well, such is the decree of your Lord. This is told about Zachariah, his wife, is given the same glad tiding. Now, nobody says about Abraham's wife that it was miraculously conceived, and nobody says about Zachariah's wife that it was miraculously conceived. However, they do say about Mary that it was miraculously conceived, although the Quran stops short of saying it. Now, the explicit wording in the Quran does not say it was a miraculous conception, but it could imply that. So the Quran could imply, I mean, you could read it and have that understanding. You could equally read it and understand that, oh, she went on and conceived naturally. And the reason why she said at the time is because at that time her marriage hadn't been consummated. So she said, well, how can I have a child? Because, and that too is an understanding that some ulama of Islam have taken. Amongst them, you've got Maulana Abdul Karim al-Athari. He writes that in his tafsir, Al-Urwat al-Wuthqa. You've got Maulana Allama Tamanna Imadi. He writes that in his tafsir commentary of that. You've got other ulama who did take this understanding. So this is a broad understanding. It's all part of Islam. It makes no difference how Jesus came to this world. What was important was his message, the message of Jesus. Now, another understanding, those people who argued that Jesus, so these ulama who argue that Jesus was born naturally, they use the verse of the Quran where Allah is listing the prophets. Wa Isa wa Ilyasa wa Yasa wa Dhul-Kifli. Allah is mentioning different prophets. And he says, wa min abaihim, and from their fathers we selected as well. So why they say why Allah uses Jesus and then follows by saying from their fathers. So this is those people who took this understanding. Other people said no, well, God didn't clearly he didn't say it was absolute miracle, but it implies that. So we're going to go with this was parthenogenesis. It was the way some creatures can reproduce. Mary reproduced. But this is the breadth of Islamic understanding. All of this could be understood. Now, yes, Mary was definitely married to Joseph. Nobody denies that Mary was married to Joseph and Najjar. That is something that was known. Even Christian sources accept that. Now, there is a whole discussion on why was Jesus often referred to as the son of Mary. Why was he not referred to then as the son of Joseph? If that was the case for those ulama. Now, even you have to remember something, even Christians have had this challenge, because many Christians, the early Christians, did not think Jesus was miraculously born. Many of them did not think that. So if you study the early Christian kind of movements, many of the early Jewish Christians did not believe that Jesus was of some miracle. They believed that Joseph was his father. So to them, how did they answer that? So they said, why was Jesus being referred to as the son of Mary and not the son of Joseph? So they give many explanations. One, some low-level explanations like, well, the Jewishness comes from the mother and so on. But one of the main understandings they give is that, you see, the Jews were awaiting a Messiah. And the Messiah was prophesied to be from the offspring of David. Now, because he was going to come and restore the kingdom of David. Mary was not from the offspring of David, but Joseph was. Now, hence, Matthew and these people in the Gospel of Matthew show that Joseph's lineage does go back to David. Now, Joseph had died long before Jesus comes back as a. So Joseph dies whilst many decades before Jesus returns as the Messiah. So he's not on the scene. Two, the Christians argued, the early Christians who said that Jesus was not miraculously born, they said because if he was called the son of Joseph, that would have given his claim legitimacy. That people would have actually maybe thought, well, maybe he is the Messiah. Because they were awaiting somebody from the offspring of David to restore the kingdom. Now, so these are some of the responses. However, on the Islamic plane, all of these exist. Now, people will say, no, such and such. But these are scholars. I've quoted to you from Maulana Abdul Karim al-Athari, who was a Salafi, who was Ahlul Hadith, a student. His teacher held this view, who was Maulana Inayatullah Gujarati, a Salafi, major Salafi scholar, a contemporary and colleague of Amritsari, the major Salafi scholar from India. This is in their writings. They've got books written on this. They've got this in his tafsir. Maulana Allama Tamanna Imadi's written on this. Other people have written on this. I'm not saying you have to believe that, but that is the breadth of. And it's interesting in the Quran when they're asked about how was Jesus born, it's answered in a riddle, where it wasn't difficult for Allah to just say he was born without a father, but Allah answers, oh, but he is like that unto Adam, without actually saying, because the parallel doesn't actually then fit, does it? Because unless you're going to believe that Adam also had a mother, so either you're going to say, well, if he's like Adam, then did Adam have a mother? And people say, no, but this is just talking about the father. No, but it says he's like him. So why didn't it it wasn't difficult for Allah to just say once in the Quran, oh, he had no father. But not once does Allah ever say that in the Quran. There isn't a single verse that actually says that. Yes, some verses may imply, but then they imply other things. Like, so the verses to do with Jesus imply that he is the Word of God, which isn't described for any other prophet. That he was, and the Holy Spirit is with him, which isn't described for any other prophet. أَيَّدْنَاهُ بِالْرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ وَكَلِمَتُهُ أَلْقَاهَا إِلَى مَرْيَمَ. and he threw the word, that his word, God's word, was Jesus. Now what does that even mean? The word of God is Jesus. It sounds very Christian. No Muslim seems to accept that part. No Muslim seems to accept the part that God said, وَمَرْيَمَ الَّتِي أَحْسَنَتْ فَرْجَهَا, Maryam who preserved and honored her private parts. She was not a wrong woman. نَفَخْنَا فِيهِ, we blew into her private parts. No Muslim believes that God blew into the private parts of Maryam alayhi salam. I don't think any Muslim does. Maybe, I'd be shocked and disgusted to think that some Muslims would believe that. I don't think they would. Right? So that God actually blew into, but that's the actual verse of the Quran, that we blew into, and it says her private parts. Now, nobody accepts that literally. They say, no, but this is just symbolic language. Which, fine. But what I'm trying to say, if the whole thing to do with Jesus seems very symbolic, and it doesn't explicitly mention something, what's the big deal? If some Muslims believe what some of these ulama have said, fine. If some Muslims want to believe this, fine. This is all part of Islam. Right, so, yep, so I hope that sheds some light. I don't know if there's any other questions. What are some questions on some of these to do with miracles and stuff like that? If there's some, people can post them. You know, so I mentioned, by the way, yeah, but people who don't do ta'wil. But this is my point. Everybody's doing some kind of interpretation. You see, now this is a good, yeah, now that's a good example. See, somebody's brought here, Ya ukhta Harun, ma kana abuka imra'a su' wa ma kanat ummuki baghiya. That your father was not a man of wrong, neither was your mother a kind of a bad, like as in she was not a fornicator or something, an adulteress. But people here, you see, the Quran doesn't say that they accused her of zina. The Quran doesn't once say that Mary was actually accused of zina. Not once. Now you could say it implies that, but then why mention the father? Ma kana abuka imra'a su', your father was not a man of wrongdoing, and your mother was not an adulteress. So people only focus on the mother. They say, oh, well, why would they say her mother's not an adulteress if, you know, if... But they said, they didn't just say her mother. They said your father. They began with the father. Say your father was not a bad person, a person that did wrongdoings. Su, like did harm, committed harm and that kind of wrongful, harmful actions. And your mother was not a woman of loose character. So what they're trying to ask her is that you come from a noble kind of thing. So they obviously ask it, but they don't. It doesn't mention in the Quran what it is that they were asking her. And it wasn't difficult to say, well, that they were accusing her of this. Now the Quran does go on to say that the later Jews accused her of adultery. You see, look, it mentions وَقَوْلِهِمْ. Look, وَقَوْلِهِمْ إِنَّا قَتَلْنَا الْمَسِيحَ عِيسَى ibn Maryam. And the fact they said, we have killed Jesus now. So Jesus is dead. So he's a grown man. According to them, he's dead. So it's past his age. قَوْلِهِمْ إِنَّا قَتَلْنَا الْمَسِيحَ ibn Maryam وَقَوْلِهِمْ عَلَى مَرْيَمَ بُهْتَانًا عَظِيمًا. And the allegation upon Mary being a slander. So this came after the allegation that we have killed Jesus. And when does that happen? After Jesus, obviously. So during Jesus' lifetime, there's no evidence that Mary is ever, not in the Bible once, is Mary ever accused of adultery. Nor in the Quran is Mary during her lifetime accused of adultery, that in the Quran either. So yes, you can say that I feel that this implies this, or this, I infer this, but it doesn't say that. Fine, that's your interpretation. You can take that. I'm not saying you can't, but there's a breadth, there's a spectrum. Right, so there's a verse in the Quran that inna mathala Isa inda Allahi ka mathali Adam, the similitude of the likeness of Jesus is the likeness of Adam, that he created them from dust and said be and they are. But Jesus wasn't created from dust. So it comes back to what, because they asked about the nature of Jesus and this was the response. So the question is, why was the response in a riddle? What in a kind of, why not just very clear, yes, Jesus didn't have this and he didn't have, because one way of looking at it is, well, the other way is maybe because it wasn't the right thing to do at the time. Right, so did Isa alayhi salam speak from the cradle? No, he didn't speak from the cradle. The verse in the Quran mentions that he was a sabi, which is a boy, a young boy. A young boy, young boys do speak. So it's not... so my point comes back to, look, people will say, why are you interpreting these things or understanding them through reason? Because without reason, because if you're going to start accepting anything that's not how humans or this world works, then you have to accept equally other mythologies. You can't kind of say, I don't accept their mythology, but I accept mine. It doesn't make any sense. Like, you're just not being fair, that's all. I mean, you can do it, but it's just it's just double standards. So I believe in consistency. You see, now this is a good question. How do you believe in angels and jinn? Through reason. Because this is, once again, these things are actually very complicated. At the same time, perceived simple by certain people. But that's their conceptualization of it. You see, it's like saying, you see, like, let's say somebody says, how does the hand move? And you say, well, it moves like this. It moves like this. Okay, at a very simplistic, poor expression, that can be done as a response. How does the hand move? It moves like this. But a true response would be incredibly intricate, complicated and complex. You would speak about the whole central nervous system, how it's laid out. You'd speak about the sensory motor cortex. You'd speak about how the coordination within the different cortices of the brain are all in sync. How the kind of messages are relayed through the central nervous system coming to the hand and how they are operating. Now that is a very complicated and complex explanation of how the hand moves. But yes, if somebody goes like this, how does the hand move? And they say this, well, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't move like that, it does, but that's not really answering the question. It depends, it is answering at a very superficial level. So angels, when people say, look, angels, they think of these kind of like, I don't know, like something floating around and doing certain things. But who told you that angels were like that? The only thing, if anything, in Islam is it's some kind of entity of light. Now, what does that even mean? The Quran doesn't explain what angels are. It doesn't. Yes, it uses some imagery at times, but that's just literary usage to give people some kind of thing to just get by with. Like, so it gives them something as a literary usage. Like, let me give you an example. The Quran speaks about a tree in the hellfire, and it says that that this tree, that طلعها, the way it emerges, كأنها رؤوس الشياطين, that this tree is as though they are the heads of demons. Right? But the question is, we've never seen a demon. So how do you know what the head of a demon looks like? So why would Allah use this language, رؤوس الشياطين? Because some things were just left to imagination. It was fine that people, it was literary usage. Just literary usage, that's all, not literal. Okay. So symbolic language is used at times. There's nothing wrong with that. So when you say angels and you understand something with a halo flying around, that's just your conceptualization of it. What are these entities of light? I mean, do you even understand light? Do you understand light? I'm just saying, we don't even understand light that is part and present in our world. I mean, just try explaining a photon to somebody. A photon. A massless particle. Massless, people. It doesn't have any mass. It comes out of nowhere. Photons are, you know, it's like in that typical debate that was between Professor Krauss and Hamza Tzortzis. And he said, well, can something come out of nothing? And he said, well, photons. They come out of nothing. Explain a photon. It's like, so we can't even explain entities of light in a very compelling way. Like, we understand they exist and we can use them, we can even measure them, we can see their impact, but the actual reality is so difficult, it's ineffable almost. It's difficult to put into words. These are complex entities, and these are within our realm. And yet you want to explain things like angels. Like, all we know is that they are entities of light. We don't know anything else. The rest is simply your conceptualization of it. So, see, somebody's saying you're draining God of all mystery. Rather, I believe I'm retaining the mystery. You see, believing in something floating around with a halo on its head because you've watched cartoons all your life of that's what angels look like is rather robbing Islam and the deen of its mystery. Right? I can't see the rest of photon is understood like plagues. No, Ayub, that's not correct. We actually do have a very good understanding of photons. It's not that we don't have a good understanding of photons. Photons are understood very well. But I meant trying to explain that to people who are not experts in that field or don't have a detailed scientific understanding of it. Trying to explain it to them is like almost impossible. Massless particles. What the hell is... what is even a particle if it's massless or doesn't have any mass? So do you see what I mean? And explaining negative particles, explaining dark matter, or like explaining dark energy. Like how do you explain these things to people who... It's not that we don't have an understanding of photons, but how do you explain it to people who don't understand that? Like they just want a very baby-like explanation, like angels. How do you explain angels then if you don't believe in miracles? Because angels ought to be these big things that are flapping around. Who told you they're like that? So that's my explanation. There's no such thing. See, nothing is interesting because space actually has energy fields in it. It doesn't actually, it's not actually nothing. You're right, nothing is not nothing. Right, so, right, okay, this isn't a lesson on photons. People start asking, and more complex than them, neutrinos. Like, what the hell? Neutrinos are like, what the hell? Check that out, that one. Right, so anyway, coming back to, right, people, I think it says my battery is running quite low, and I don't want this to kind of die out, so, now, how did the prophets communicate? We don't know. We don't really know. The prophet said sometimes there's like a ringing going on and this, and sometimes I just feel a weight, and we don't know. That's not, you see, not knowing something is not necessarily counter reason. People will say the Quran came from the prophet. We accept that. To him it came from God. We believe that as Muslims. Non-Muslims will say, maybe he was just having thoughts in his head. That's where we diverge as faith. And having that faith is not counter-reason. Because God is never counter-reason. God has never been counter-reason. The problem that is counter reason is the God that's obsessed. The God of this glorious cosmos all of a sudden becomes obsessed with women plucking the eyebrow here. That is, yes, that seems to be like, doesn't make any sense. But God in and of himself is never counter reason. So people, right, I'm gonna wrap this up because I don't want it to kind of collapse and I don't want to lose the video. I did have the hadith on the poisoning of the Prophet, and it is nonsensical, it is not true. I will go through that in much detail. I did have the chains and to show how this hadith has problematic people in it. Even Imam Bukhari cuts out the chain, so he begins the hadith with Yunus al-Aili. This Yunus ibn Yazid al-Aili, this is a problem because he has issues with him. Then transmitting from he transmits from Urwa, once again not a connected chain. The whole chain is not connected almost. So Imam Bukhari kind of like, he kind of skips a certain, breaks his own rule, does that there. The hadith clashes with other hadith as well. It makes no sense about the Prophet being poisoned. I feel that maybe some people fabricated this or misrelayed it. Somehow they thought that this was going to add some honor to the Prophet, because the story is absurd in saying that, oh, the Prophet's companion Bishr ibn al-Bara al-Ansari got poisoned and died there and then, or within moments. And the Prophet somehow, this is in 7th Hijri, 3 years later, dies from that poison. It's ridiculous, it's absurd. It also goes against the message of the Quran, that we believe that the Prophet was instructed to carry out the message and Allah had protected him. So, but I'll do a detailed analysis of that on another day, right? Because this battery is dying out, people. Right, so I hope this has been of some help. I want to say, people, if you do reach out to me, more than welcome to reach out to me. I've had quite a few people reaching out to me. Just, I want to give some advice to anybody reaching out to me, please. I love talking to new people. I'm very much like that. I will interact with you if I can, if I have time. That's all good. Right, however, I want to say, if you reach out to me on social media, if you have a regular profile, that's fine, because I will usually check your profile just to see who you are, whether you're wasting my time, whether you're a troll. Now, if you have a kind of troll-like profile, then I will expect you, or if you contact me on something like WhatsApp. I don't normally, I mean, usually on WhatsApp it's friends and things like this, so, but a lot of people have my number. I'm not so fussed about that. If you contact me, look, have the courtesy to introduce yourself. Okay, tell me a bit about you. Who are you? You know, what are you about? What's this? Because at the end of the day, I don't know if you're just wasting my time. I don't know if you're a troll. I don't know if you're just... So I need to know if I'm going to really take you seriously. So just introduce yourself with some courtesy. A bit of what you do. I study, I do this, I'm finishing this degree, this is what I'm doing, I have an interest in Islam, I've come across these studies, I'm studying these kind of things, you know, I've come across you and this is what I'd like. You know, give me a bit of... you know, I had somebody kind of message me the other day saying something like, and I asked him, I said, who are you? He said, you can call me, I don't know, Muhammad, or you can call me Ahmed. I was like, I ain't going to call you. I said, I just blocked him. So it's as simple as that, people. Take the courtesy to do that. The other thing I was going to say is, if you do reach out to me, please do not, under any circumstances, preach down to me. Okay, I'm not interested. Right, I will definitely block you. I'm not interested in your sermon. I had somebody message me today going on about like trying to preach to me. And try and tell me that, oh, I have concern for you, and I just said, look, listen, all right, thanks, mate. And I kind of said it nicely first, and the person said, look, I said, look, I don't even know who you are, mate. And he said, well, I've been asking you questions for 5 years or something. I said, well, that just goes to show, doesn't it? Like, I don't actually, look, like, I don't even know who you are. Like, what do you... Like, look, fine, I appreciate your concern for me, you know, thank you, much love, but don't preach down to me. I ain't interested in your preaching. If you really want to deliver a khutbah, stand in front of a mirror and just keep talking and see how that works for you. Because I guarantee you 60 seconds in, you're going to even be like, what the hell? So please don't preach down to me. That's something I definitely do not welcome. But other than that, do reach out to me if you need to. I'm there. People, let's wrap this up. Right, so I don't know, there was some question. Bilal Sikandar said some questions, but there was no question there, so I can't really answer that. People, right, it's getting pretty late. If there was, right, nothing to it. Alright guys, take very good care of yourselves. Brother, please tell everyone the truth. I'm trying, man, I'm trying. Hal shahadta musalsal antara. I've seen some of it, it's very good. Very good, very good. Poetry. Alright. A great night. People, inshallah. In the words of Mir, Taqi Mir, who was called the god of Urdu, he said, Ab to jate hain but kade se Mir, phir milenge gar khuda laya. He said, let us now go from this idol place of idol worship. We will come again, but by the will of God. I just love the irony there. That was so awesome. People, take very good care of yourselves. Inshallah. Till next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.